Hey guys, this is Ryan from Mac Kite. Today we're going to be talking about the Appletree Zapple. The Zapple is Appletree's new foil drive inspired board to be used specifically with the foil drive assist. There are other assist units out there other than foil drive. It's not going to work with all of those. It might be compatible with some, but this was specifically designed to work with the foil drive. I've been riding this board all fall. I'm a huge fan of it. So let's dive in, talk a little bit about the board, what I like, and if there's any potential cons. All right, so let's dive in, talk about the Appletree Zapple, and go through some of the finer details on it. Now, the Appletree factory has been making their boards with this closed cell construction foam. It's a very dense, very durable, heavy duty foam. Benefits to that. Biggest benefit is if you puncture your board, something crazy happens, rather than having to worry about it taking on water, swelling up and missing your session, or perhaps a trip that you're on, it's not going to take on any water. So the top layer, the glass can be damaged. It's not going to soak up water in that foam core. So huge benefit to really all the Appletree boards. The Zapple is no different. It has that foam core. One difference with the Zapple that they did specifically for foil drive is they created a signal window in the board. So the front of the board and through to the tracks on the top side, I believe, has a signal window, meaning there's an area where there's not carbon all throughout it to allow that Bluetooth signal from your remote to get to the foil drive unit. Why is this important? Obviously, the more you put in the way of the Bluetooth signal between the remote and the foil drive, the higher likelihood you have of some sort of interference. And then you have your prop will cut out and you won't be running the foil drive anymore. So they created a signal window, works great with that signal window. I have no issues with the transmittance of the Bluetooth signal. One important note, you do still want to put foam in the tracks here. So this board is a high density foam. It does still have a lot of carbon in it. You want to help yourself out, put foam inside the tracks, and really foam inside the tracks just keeps the water out of there, and water is the #1 issue with transmitting the Bluetooth signal. So good thing really to do with any board, but that definitely helps. With the foam in the tracks, I've had zero issues with connections with this board. I've even punched through small bits of white water with the remote up on the nose and no issues with it. So signal transmission is awesome. You don't have to worry about the board cutting out anymore like you do in some other boards that have a lot of carbon to them. The Zapple is built based off their prone foil boards. So that's already a very efficient, very effective board for proning. Which makes sense why it would be a great foil drive option then as well. So the Zapple comes in 3 sizes, a 5 foot, 5'4", and a 5'8". The 5 foot is 38 liters, the 5'4" is 46 liters, and the 5'8" is 54 liters. Don't be too concerned about the liters in the board. With really all the foil drive, it tends to be more about the board shape, the planing surface, and how efficient that board is, more than just the liters in the board. So you can definitely step down a little bit, go with a little smaller board if you want, or keep the same size board and step down your foil size, which is what I like to do. It's more fun to ride waves with the smaller, more efficient, funner to carve, funner, more playful foil than it is to have to upsize that foil because you're riding a smaller board. So the smaller 2 sizes, the 5 foot and 5'4", are 18.5 wide. The larger 5'8" is 19.5 wide. Having a little narrower board is going to allow it to feel a little more nimble up on foil. Anytime you take away the width of the board, they always feel a little more nimble. The other thing with this being shaped off of their prone foil board is where you stand in the track placement. So the track placement is a little bit further forward than other boards. What that does when you flip this over is it's going to then align your feet more with the middle of the board. So rather than standing back here on the tail of it, having all this swing weight out in front of you, you're standing more towards the middle of the board, so it's going to feel a lot smaller than what it is. So pretty narrow, you're standing towards the front, so the board feels a lot smaller than a 5 foot, 5'4" or 5'8" board. So really cool feature. You've got all the efficiency, the planing ability of having that larger board. The shape is really great, fast, efficient, but the performance is that of a little bit smaller board. So it really makes it easy to, I mean, you could even upsize or maybe stay on the same size board you're riding. It's gonna feel smaller, it's gonna be more efficient, allow you to ride a little bit smaller foil. So really, really awesome board. Moving along to the other side, traction pad's been awesome. They have a variety of different traction pads they use on different boards. I've never really had any issues. If they do get a little slippery, I have put wax on some traction pads, really amongst a whole lot of different brands. A little bit of wax on a pad if you have issues with booties or no booties can really help out, but found the traction pad really awesome. One thing that I would say, and I kind of have this preference with a lot of the boards I ride in traction pads, is it is nice to have some sort of indicator of where the midline is on the board and kind of where the front of the pad is and the back of the pad, just for quick reference when you're popping up and putting your feet down. So flipping it back over here, the one thing that I haven't talked about yet is the trench. New concept for foil drive. Appletree is one of the first that I've seen with the trench. There are, I'm sure, going to be other brands later on. The trench makes a huge difference when you're riding and how efficient the board is. The biggest thing I noticed right away when I hopped on it, just riding it in the flats between wave sections and in the flat water, is how much easier it is to pop up without any sort of assistance from a wave. So with similar sized boards and other brands, part of it, I mean, is going to have to do with the shape, the width, the length, all that as well. But going as close to I can to this style of board, riding it back to back with a trench in it. Trench makes a big difference. You definitely notice how much more efficient it is, how much easier you are to get the board up and plane and then take off on foil. So here in Lake Michigan, it's awesome. We have a ton of wind swell. We've got a lot of really good swell to ride with a foil. A lot of fairly challenging conditions to get up and ride in. And being able to take off really quickly really helps you boost your wave count and get more time out there riding the waves, which is what we all love to do. So the trench, why does the trench work so well? A lot of different factors. Obviously, it's going to affect the water flow. The max units on the foil drive come up pretty close to the bottom of this part of the board. So the water is going to flow fairly smoothly all the way across here and out the back. So one thing the trench does is it's going to minimize the drag of the water flowing across the bottom of the board. So the foil drive max unit sits fairly flush here, allows us water to flow all the way across without being disturbed too much and out the back of the trench. Another thing that the trench does is it is thinner. The distance between the attachment of the foil or the foil drive unit is now closer to your feet. Now what this does is it gives you a lot more foil feel. There's obviously weight from the foil drive unit. That weight does have an effect when you're carving, when you're turning, and having that weight closer to your feet makes it easier to control that, makes it easier to make those tighter turns, and just it makes it a lot more fun to ride. So another thing that having the foil drive closer to your feet does is it's going to reduce the amount of torque the unit has on the board. So it's going to make it easier to keep the nose down. Anytime you put the motor from the foil drive lower, further away from the board, it's going to create more torque. It's going to drive the nose of the board up, making you put more pressure on the front of the board and able to level it out in order to ride it level. So you're either dancing with a lot of front foot pressure, getting on waves, maybe back foot pressure if it's a small day, or riding really wide stance. It's gonna make it a lot easier to go from riding under motor power to just wave power without having to do as much dancing around on the board, if you will. Now you can also do that by just moving your motor closer to the board as well. Anytime you move the motor closer to the board, that helps. But the thing is, the closer you move the foil drive motor to your foil drive, the more precise you have to be with how you're riding that out of the water, because if you get some chops, some waves, and it hits the foil drive unit, or in this case, it's gonna hit the bottom of the board, it will slow you down. So by having this inset, you can essentially keep the same foil drive cable length, and when you put it on this inset board, it's then going to move the motor pod closer to the bottom of the board. So your touchdowns, I would say, are similar to what they would be if you're hitting the water with your foil drive case or your foil drive unit. So there's still resistance there. But what this is going to do is it allows you to bring the whole motor up closer to the board, which then also gives you more effective mass length to play with too, if you're pumping around out there or riding this well. So another note with that, this is going to bring your motor up closer to the board. So you lose about 5 centimeters roughly of overall mass length, because it's moving the mast closer to the board, and about 5 centimeters of that effective cable length, if you will, for your motor pod. So cool, allows you to ride with essentially shorter distance from your board to the motor. You can keep the same size mast if you extend the mast length. Otherwise, your mast is going to be about 5 centimeters shorter. So something to keep in mind there if you do want to try the Zapple is if you're really set on your mast length, you may want to get something just a little bit longer. I didn't have really any issues running the same 80 centimeter mast with this board as I did on any other board with the foil drive unit, but something to be aware of. Another thing with the trench in here is the trench works perfectly with the larger max battery. So you can see how that sits up there pretty flush. If you are riding the smaller sport battery, you're going to create a little bit of a gap here. That is noticeable in terms of turbulence with the overall unit. So something to be aware of. I would say these boards tailored a little bit more towards the max power battery, not so much towards the max sport battery. However, I'm sure there's ways that you could cut a piece of foam or something like that, stuff it in here, tape it in there to allow that water flow to flow over it just as well with a max sport battery as well. And that goes without saying, if you have a slim unit and you put it in here, it's going to be recessed a little bit. So ideally, you're running the max power battery with this, and everything works perfectly. Another thing that I liked about this board, I'm about 180 pounds. I felt like the track was in a really good place for a lot of our conditions here. I never felt like I was too far forward on the board or too far back, and I always felt like I had a little bit of room to shift if I needed to. So if I was in really small waves, there's a little bit of room to shift back. If I was in really much larger waves, I could shift forward. So I thought that they did an awesome job with the track placement on this board, which is key because you really want to have your nose cone slammed all the way to the front of this trench in order to be super effective. Now, another thing to talk about this, and maybe the only downside that I've noticed, is the trench and changing batteries. So you do need to remove the foil drive in order to change batteries. As you can see, the latches are completely covered. You can't get the nose cone off unless you remove your unit. For me, not a huge issue because I've been using the CWS screws here. So typically I've got these preset. I've got the foam in there holding them in place. Real easy to set this unit down on top of here. All the posts will be sticking out of my screws. I've got the wing nuts that I tighten it down with real quick, or when you're swapping batteries, loosen them up, pop the unit off, swap your battery, pop it back on real quick once you got the freshie in there. So a little extra work compared to just dealing with the latch, but if you do have some screws that finger tighten, like the CWS screws, those are great. Conrad click nuts, they came out with a foil drive setup that allows you to use their click nuts so you can line the wing nuts up for a little more efficient water flow across them. Either way, if you've got something where it's set in place, really easy to pop the foil drive unit off, swap your battery, pop it back on, and I would say the performance upgrade you have by running a board with a trench is totally worth that extra inconvenience. All right, so that is the Appletree Zapple. I'm a huge fan of this board. Been riding it all fall. It's been difficult to hop off of this and demo other boards because it is that efficient, effective. I'm able to ride smaller foils with it. It feels more natural because I don't have to have as much pressure on my front foot as I do with other boards. And just overall awesome board that really boosts the performance and the more natural surf feel of the foil drive unit. So definitely worth checking out. If you guys have any questions about the Zapple or any other products on our website, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Give us a call, leave us an email, drop a comment below. As always, it's fun to see what you guys are riding out there in terms of boards, foils with your foil drive. So feel free to leave some comments there. It's always fun to get a discussion going there below the video here. And don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel. Till next time.